Gomarjaba, everyone.
Hi.
So, ancient cities, delicious food, lush nature, hospitable people, and a lot more. This is about what we have enjoyed in Georgia since we came here, since we visited it. I'm here with Samuel from Sweden.
Hello.
And Levani from Georgia.
Gamarjoba.
And are very excited to immerse ourselves in the Georgian life and culture. It stirred our curiosity a lot, and that's why we are eager to ask a lot of questions to you, Levani. That's why be ready to answer them. And let's start. Samuel, are you ready?
Yes. Here in Georgia, here in Tel Aviv, we should say, and we took the car from Tbilisi. It was a very, very dangerous, not dangerous, I shouldn't say dangerous, a very adventurous journey. And thinking, like, I've seen a lot of cars and seen many people driving around, like, what does a car mean for a Georgian? Like, is it a very car-centric culture, or how would you say?
First of all, thank you, and I welcome in Georgia. And of course, for everyone, the first experience after they come out of the airport is the driving. So it's a great question. And I would say that Georgians really like their cars, in most cases, of course. And although we really like to drive and to have road trips and all of that, the driving culture is not that safety centric, to say it lightly. So the main thing is experience and enjoyment of your drive, and the safety is unfortunately the second most important thing in that sense.
Okay.
When do young people start to drive here?
You can get your driver's license once you turn 17, and you get for a year for like a learner's driver permit, and then once you turn 18, you can drive as much and as long as you want.
And you? When did you start to drive?
Oh, it was 10 years ago when I was 17, and more than 10 years ago actually. And I was at first terrified because of the driving style, but you really get used to it relatively quickly. So it didn't get a lot of time. Take a lot of time to get adjusted.
Yeah, so talking about driving, our driver was also very excited to tell us more about the Georgian places of interest, to show us. He even told us, let me know when you're at Tbilisi again, and I will show you the main places. So what are the ways Georgians tend to show their hospitality, besides talking so beautiful about the Georgian culture?
Okay. So with hospitality, I think one of the major reasons why we are considered so hospitable country is first of all due to our history, because a lot of the times, if we are frank and truthful, when the guests came in our country, they didn't have good intentions. So we had a lot of wars, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But if we get a guest who has a right and good intention to enjoy our country and be as good as possible, then we really, really want to have them the best experience that they get.
Oh, I remember, sorry to interrupt, about the mother of Georgia.
Yeah, we just
the
gonna
statue, our Moldovan colleague presented
and
it.
The main thing with that statue is that she's holding on one hand a glass of wine, and on the other hand a sword, of course. And that's one of it has been the main theme of our history, and we always try to, of course, offer our wine and culture, but a lot of times we need also to use the other thing that she's holding. So
we can say for the listeners at home that maybe don't know Georgia that well, that is a statue, right, in Tbilisi, of a woman with a sword and a wine cup.
Yeah, she's actually called the mother of Kartveli. So Kartvelians, as we were like one of the first tribes that used to live in these lands, and the name Kartveli, so Sakartvelo, comes from that. And she is considered as mother of Georgia, a symbol of Georgian people, because mothers in Georgia especially have a special place in our history and in our culture, and that's why the statue is really important for us.
Yeah, and you already mentioned about Sakartvelo. Tell us more about it. Why do we call Georgia, and why do we call it Sakartvelo?
Yeah, so that's also quite a long story, but I will try to be as short as possible. So Georgia's history as a country, so Sakartvelos history as a country, starts from these tribes that used to live here, and the main tribe that after which came the country of Sakartvelo, Georgia, was the Kartvelians tribe. So after that, the country grew and grew. And for Georgia, there are several opinions, and it's still debatable, I guess. But the main history I know of it is that when Persians were like naming other countries or places, and they were exploring their immediate surroundings, when they came near the Baltic and in the middle of Caspian and Black Sea, the land here was considered as the land of wolves. So in Persian it's like Gigin or something like that. So after that, when it spread into Latin and spread into Rome, for example, they took the same name and used it. And one of the other reasons, of course, is that for Georgians, Saint George is the biggest figure, one of the biggest figure in our culture and religion. Of course, we also have Saint George on our main like heraldic stuff. For example, symbol where we can see the Saint George killing a 8-legged dragon, and like the mythos of Georgia is really connected with Saint George. So there you have the two reasons why we have Georgia, and the other why we have Sakartvelo. Yeah.
Do you have many wolves here? And speaking of wolves,
yeah, we get like Georgia is in a place where from both sides, so from north and the south, we have really big mountains, like from Caucasus Mountains. So in this, so we also have like steppes, steppe regions where we also have a lot of wolves. So that can be one of the really cool stories and the reasons why Georgia is Georgia, and I'm sticking with that. So.
And also St. George can be seen through the cross that you have on your flag, on your banner. So it's quite symbolic.
Yeah, speaking of symbols, and Georgia, one thing I saw being here around in Georgia, in Tbilisi, in Tel Aviv, and all around is the symbol and the word of liberty and freedom. Like you see it everywhere. There were a Liberty Bank, I think, Liberty, Freedom Square. It's so important, it seems, to the Georgians. But how? Like, what does these words mean to you? But also like to Georgians in general.
Yes, thank you for that question. And for every Georgian, I think the word liberty means a lot. And it's actually called in Georgian, it's tavis upleba. It means that tavis upleba. If you translate it like directly, it means to have your own will on yourself and not have anyone influence over you. So that's where that's
kind of poetic.
Yeah, it really is, and it also comes out of our long history of war, and the geographical location of Georgia is really hard in that sense that, for example, we are one of the few Christian countries that is still alive, to say it like that, in our region, and especially after 8th or 9th century, when the Persians and other big states, Muslim states, started to grow their influence, Georgia was always one of the first stops to take care of, and then they would continue in to Europe or to other states. So that's why to have our own freedom is, for us, it's the most important thing, and that's why we always use that word really in a strong sense.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, important to mention now the recent protests that were organized in the Liberty Square. The protests were based on the law on transparency related to foreign influence that was proposed by the government. Can you tell us a little about it, and how is it important to your liberty, like your symbol of liberty, to have this demonstration?
Yeah, so for now and for these few years, the liberty of Georgia always has been dependent on our friends that we have, because if we are alone, we can't really have the liberty that we want, because our neighbors, I won't name them, but everyone, I'm sure, will know who I speak of. They are really big, and they can take that liberty from us anytime they want. Although we will fight, it will still probably end in their favor. So to have friends from Western side of the world, like EU and the United States, they are kind of a guarantor of our freedom and the liberty that we have. So that protest was, although there were some other reasons for that, the main theme is that if we want to be free and if we really want to have the liberty, we need the friends, the right friends who will take us as we are and help us in this really cruel world that we live in nowadays.
But like the Georgian fighting spirit is pretty big, right? It is very strong. Like I remember something I think you told me yesterday, that a Georgian could sell their soul but not their land. It's like
that's also in our DNA and blood for sure. And the fighting part, of course, is due to, on the one hand, due to the history and the land, the importance of land, because we are a really small country compared to a lot of countries. So every inch and every square meter matters for us, and especially after 2008 and in 90s when we lost our two regions, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. After that we are really cautious of every 1 meter that we have, so that is really important, and that's why a lot of people really care about that. And on the fighting thing, I would say that one of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, that Persians used to call Georgian the land of wolves, the other reasons can be that the Georgians were such really strong warriors, and we can name a lot of different battles where we were outnumbered by 1 to 10 or 1 to 12 or maybe more, and that we still survived. So that can be one of more reasons for that. Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on to music.
Because
a more fun topic.
yeah, maybe a bit dark, but like speaking of like culture and stuff like that, like there's a lot of different culture, and like how's like the music culture in Georgia? Do people what's like the traditional music instruments and stuff like that? What
For
would you
sure,
say?
the music, Georgians really love their music, and we have a pretty rich culture, I would say. Although we are not that successful in the modern type of music that we see that is really popular for now. Historically, we have amazing singers and groups that created an amazing pieces of music, and one of the good examples is the Chakrulo, which is considered by UNESCO as a World Heritage, and it's protected, and it's also sent in the space by NASA in either 70s or 80s. I don't really remember correctly, but that song is sent in space in a sense that this is one of the world's best creations that we humans could create. So if someone would have find this piece of music, they would listen to it and get to know humans.
Aliens will
probably.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. And in general, tell us more about the musical like traditional instruments that you used to sing maybe with your family.
Yeah, traditionally one of the most traditional instruments that I can think of right now is called chonguri. Chonguri. It's kind of like a guitar, but at the same time it's not a guitar. It has like 3 strings. And the sound that you get from that is really special. I would say it's in some way closer to the Asian type of influence, the style of music that you can hear from either Azerbaijan or Iran, and that type of influence, but it's not really that, it's really different. And we also talked about like we are right in the middle of both two big continents, right? Asia and Europe. So we are right in the middle of that. And culturally, the both really influenced our country and our music also. So we get like this unique piece of art that is not really European or not really Asian, and it's really different. And other than chonguri, we also have some special drums that we use. It's called doli. Doli. Yeah. It's like the drum, but you play it with your hands. And the sound from it is really, really cool. So, yeah.
Have you tried playing like some of the instruments? Like is it hard?
Yeah, like for example, chonguri. if our listeners have played the guitar, it's relatively easy. Like you don't have to be physically really ready to do it. But if you are playing chonguri, since there are like 3 strings and the chonguri doesn't really have the cut in the middle like the guitar does, so if you want to have a good noise and good sound come out of it, you have to be strong. And you have to pick the strings really, really hard. So in that way, it's pretty rough, but you get a good result afterwards.
Is it a tradition that you have when you're gathering with your family, or is it more played at different official holidays?
For now, I would say that it's not as big of a tradition as it was to play the local instruments, but in the big events like weddings or like birthday parties, which we really love, and we do it in a lot of different ways. So in that places you always get the local must dance to songs that we play, and unfortunately a lot of times we don't really hear it live, but the recordings are available a lot on the YouTube. So yeah, it's still used, and also the dances that are I think really big and really, really good. Georgian dance is really unique as
I've
our
seen it. It's amazing.
yeah.
How is the? I have never seen it. Like, how is a Georgian dance? How would you describe it? Like,
I think it's more like a boy that wants to flirt, kind of.
Yeah,
by
that's one of the
dancing.
ones. Yeah.
And it's very, I don't know, it gives me thrills when I'm watching
Yeah.
it. It's just such a...
So the most of the dances are have some kind of theme. Like for example, as Alina mentioned,
like a story or
like a story, yeah, like where a young man is trying to get to know a girl, and like he's like dancing with her, and she's of course Georgian women is like more controlled, she's like more strict, and she's a little bit cold, and she doesn't let him closer to her really quickly, but slowly as he like proves his abilities and proves his manhood, so to say, then they start to connect. And yeah, this is really beautiful. And we have some other dances that we do a lot. For example, one of that is on every Georgian wedding, the bride and the groom must do the dance, and that's also kind of something like that, where a man follows the woman who is really graceful and like a mother of Kartli, as we mentioned. She's like really beautiful, and yeah, it's the dances are really crazy, and also a lot of dances include a lot of fighting. So I mean, like with the sword and the shield. So a lot of dances came after the warriors and the battles that we have. So we can see like in live, for example, one of the biggest Georgian bands and groups is called Sukhishvilevi. And if you can search their dances on YouTube, it's crazy. Like it's live fighting with swords that are really sharp, and at the same time dance. So.
Eating churchella and at the same time dancing with the swords.
Yeah, that's That's cool.
What would you say about Georgia's Eurovision song? Have you watched it?
Which one do you mean?
I don't remember the name, but I've seen the video. Do you think it will qualify for the finals?
Oh, you mean the recent one?
Yeah. This year's.
This year's,
So,
yeah. To be honest with you, I haven't listened to it.
Okay.
But
so it's not a big thing.
No.
Eurovision
I guess recently, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when we started to perform at Eurovision, I think it was around that time, or maybe 10 or 15 years ago. It was a big thing when we started. It was like huge to have ability to compete with other European countries. But nowadays, it's not that big of a thing, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But how is like speaking of like music in general and not only like traditional music, like how is it with young people? Do they play in bands and stuff like that, or are they more like
do they listen to Charkrulo or not? Not anymore.
Yeah, with the young generation, I think the popularity for sure goes down. And for example, if we compare the generations, my grandfather, who is like 85 years old, if you like here and then when we are hanging out together, he will ask me to put that Chakrulo song on my phone, and he always cries on that, because the importance of that song and the lyrics that it has and the story that it has is more relevant, of course, to the older generations than to the new ones, because they were not born in during the war. They were free. They were more or less free, of course. They had the better education. They had the better lives. So the hard men, as you can say, that used to live in Georgia are really changing, so to say, and the young generation are more listening to like Spotify and all of the modern trends that we have, and that's also one of the major results of globalization, as we know that in one country something is popular and it's the same in another. So
yeah, we listened shortly about the Shakrulo like a bit here before, and it's a really beautiful song. I don't know any Georgian at all, but I still got feels.
Even if you don't know anything about Georgian culture, you listen to it and you just feel it, kind of.
I totally agree with you. And for the people, for me, the way I explain some things like this, for example, The Lord of the Rings, right? We all know the trilogy, and for me it feels like that, where you have the really hard environment and where you have your brothers and your friends whom you take arms with and fight for your freedom and for your life and for your country. So that's one of the main themes of the song, and that's why it's so important for us.
Okay, good.
But do you have like any other like favorite Georgian song or band or like artist or?
That we could listen to after going
so we
back to our
can like
countries.
Spotify tips to our listeners at home.
I really like the if we are talking about like Georgian typical traditional music, I really like also some mountain special music, which you only get from mountain people that live in Caucasus Mountains, and the special instrument is. It's really different than I forgot previously when we were talking about it, but the sound that you get from it is amazing, and I will show you and listen afterwards.
What's the instrument called?
It's garmon, maybe. You know, I don't know if it's in Russian like that, but I don't really know how it's in English.
Garmon.
I think I know what it is, but that thing
it's kind of a keyboard. It has a keyboard on both sides, like piano keyboard.
Accordion.
Accordion. Yeah. But it's a little bit different from like typical accordion you get from maybe in Europe or other countries. It has a little small difference, but the noises you get from it is crazy.
It's a really nice instrument.
And now finally just give us a really young, trendy song that all the young people listen. Maybe a pop rap song.
Yeah, okay, so there's a artist called Tamada. Tamada, yeah, and the name actually means really, it has a big meaning. So you know that Georgians love feasts, right? So on the feast, on every Georgian feast, you get a like feast manager type of person, but he's not a manager, like he's more like dictator on the feast. So he's the one who always says the first toast, and he's the one who always manages everything on the table. So Tamada means that person, and
it's actually, isn't the Tamada the one that hosts the weddings? You can say that. Also,
and that artist is really popular with the young people because he's mixing some old traditional Georgian sounds with the new modern.
I love this combination of
like
folk
kind of
and modern.
Folk and like techno or like something like that, or minimalistic stuff. So I will also show you that.
We'll know that.
Tamada. And speaking of like traditional Georgian feast, like I've heard so much about the Georgian feast, but like for what I've heard for a Swedish person, as I am, it sounds very like different. Can you describe it to our listeners at home that don't really like don't have this how do you say, this opportunity to see the beautiful Georgian feast?
Yeah, Georgian feast is a celebration of the history of food and of the reality that we have for now. I think that's the best way for me to put it. I'm sure that there might be some authors that put it better, but for me it's the celebration of the whole existence of being a Georgian. Like, one hand, of course, is the food. The food for Georgians is really important, and you already tasted some of them, but there are still a lot. Good. And having the ability to put the food on the table and have the peacetime, so to say, is really, really important. And again, due to the history, there was a lack of peacetime for Georgia. So there was a lack of time where you could sit down and have a feast with all of your friends and neighbors and fellow countrymen. So that can be one of the reasons that for now the feasts are so popular, because you are kind of rushing to, because you know in your mind that tomorrow or like a year from now the situation might change and you might not have the ability to do so. So for me, I think that's one of the reasons. Of course, the wine culture in Georgia is really big, and the ability to drink wine in a peaceful manner is really important for Georgians. So that's one of the reasons. And also the communication and the enjoyment of partners. And also one of the reasons of also due to the history is that the educational sphere and educational institutions in Georgia is about, like, I would say 100 or 150 years old. So before that, the education would have to come somewhere. So the education would typically come from the feast, where you met like people who maybe knew more than you did. And you would ask something, or during the table, everyone's talking about a lot of stuff like culture, politics, I don't know, social stuff. So the feast was like an institution where you could go, sit down, and listen and learn a lot of stuff. So that's a big part of this, of course.
That's very, very interesting. And how often do people go to feast? Like, is it every week, every day?
It's pretty common. It's pretty common. I wouldn't say every day, because everyone works. Not everyone, but a lot of people work. So I think once a week at least is kind of average time of feast in Georgia for a person. And especially during the springtime or summertime, or in Kakheti, since we are in Kakheti, during the autumn time, when we start to pick the grapes and start producing the wine, that time is considered as a new year in Kakheti. So if you go by car in Kakheti small villages at that time, in the evenings you would smell the smell of tzwadi, the meat the barbecue that they are doing, and also hear the feasts in almost all of the houses, because you get like 2 or 3 weeks period when you pick the grapes. So that time is like prime time for drinking and feasting in Kakheti.
I've also read that Georgia is the birthplace of wine.
Yep.
I know that it's very confusing, because a lot of countries are mentioned to be the birthplace of wine, but Georgia for sure is a symbol of wine. So also it is said that the origins of wine has been very accidentally discovered in Georgia. Could you tell us more about it, and if you practice winemaking in your family?
So first of all, about being the birthplace of wine, I think that's one of the coolest names that country can get.
Yeah, it really is.
And I don't really
personal branding.
So,
the country.
The science of that goes that far in the future, in the past, is not 100% accurate, of course, and there can be some other country, but as far as I know, it is true. So we can probably say that it's true. And about the winemaking, especially in Kakheti region where we are right now, it is really popular, and it is considered as a family tradition for every family to have at least a small amount of vineyard, either in your house or in the valley, in Alazani Valley. And a lot of families produce wine either for themselves or to sell, either grapes or wine. As me and my family, we of course have a vineyard where we produce small amount just for us. And the best thing with that is, from grapes you can get a lot of different things other than wine. For example, chacha, it's all also derived from the crushed grapes.
Churchela.
And churchela, of course. Churchela has its own history, and we can, I think, make another podcast
about
only on churchela, because it's really important historically for Georgians and Kakhetians. And one of the first things that we sent to Ukraine during the war was churchela.
Really?
Yeah, it was actually coordinated by us, Tenius, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was like in thousands.
I think it's a very smart decision, as you said that it's available a lot of
Yeah,
time.
so the families, everyone has it at home in
Yeah.
Kakheti. So they when we announced it, everyone started to take their churchkelas to us, and we had it in thousands. I don't remember the exact number, but right when the war started, we sent a lot of them. And the important thing is that it doesn't go bad. So
Yeah.
and it's really tasty, and it has a lot of energy. So we also call it like Georgian Snickers.
It is really.
Yeah.
And how would you describe it, like, for people that don't know what churchela is? Like, it's a grape with
Yeah, it's
walnut in it.
Yeah,
or-
so you can imagine Snickers, but inside you have only like whole walnuts, and from the outside you get the grapes juice that is mixed with the flour, and that is then like cooked, and you get then you have to dry it, and after some time it gets really hard, and yeah, it's really cool. Yeah.
And who usually makes these kinds of foods? Like, is it the women in the household, is the men, or is it like everyone? Does
Yeah,
everyone
so
make food?
the doing of churchkhela is a special event. So after you pick the grapes and start making the wine, so after you crush the grapes into your quarry there or other some kind of place, you take away some juice that you get before it becomes wine, and then you save it. So and after, I don't know, 2 weeks, either in November or October, before the weather gets too bad, because you have to do it outside, so it's like a big family thing where you gather, or like neighbors or friends, and you have a really big like jar where you start to boil this substance, and everyone has their own thing to do. So typically women are the ones who are putting the walnuts into this big jar and then taking out churchkelas, and then you get like men or other like children who are taking these things and putting it in the yard to dry it. And so it's a family thing, and everyone has their own. But for example, the men are the ones who are tasked with making Georgian barbecue mtswadi. So that's like one of the men's responsibilities.
Yeah, so we've all heard about hachapuri, about khinkali. They are amazing, we know. But you also mentioned something about a more exotic meal that you had, and it's the snail dish.
Snail?
Yeah, you've mentioned yesterday that you tasted snails in Javaketi province, and I've also googled it, and it's a fact that in Javaketi province it's famous to have snail dishes. Could you explain it more?
I don't remember that I mentioned something like that.
You did.
Snail? Did
Yeah.
Snake? I don't know. It sounds like French.
Okay,
to
I will
me.
research more about
Yeah,
it, but
sure.
it is a fact about it.
Yeah, maybe, and I don't remember,
But Georgia has so many regions, and I
Yeah.
think each region has its own specific.
for sure.
So tell us about the specific food of Kakheti, because
Okay.
I'm sure there are some meals that are not so popular in Tbilisi, for example.
Okay, so nowadays, whatever was really tasty and good in each region or each village has already come out of the local sphere and is distributed around the country, because of one of the reasons is tourism, of course, and that's the reason. But if we can say that, for example, mtswadi, as I already said, mtswadi is the specialty of Kakheti. Like, you can of course get it in other parts of Georgia, but the reason is actually that the special aroma and taste that you get in mtswadi is caused by the grape sticks and grape wood that you burn to cook the mtswadi. So in Kakheti we have a lot of grape vineyards. So after you pick the wine, then you get all of the sticks that you have to cut off for it to grow another year. And we collect that sticks, like save it, make it dry, and then after some time you can cook them mtswadi with using this wood and these sticks that you get from vineyards, and it has a special flavor that it's burning really hot. Like different to other woods, it's really hot, and you get a special aroma from that. Because of course you can make mtswadi at home in your like kitchen, but it's really different. So Kakheti is famous with that. We also have, for example, in the western part of Georgia, we get khachapuris, which are only done like correctly and precisely there. For example, Acharian khachapuri, as I'm sure that you have also already tasted it, and you have to go in Batumi to taste it. And it's like there are some other places, but it's really popular there. Also, some other types of khachapuri, as you already mentioned, Javakheti and Samskhe Javakheti, where you can taste their special type of khachapuri, which is really different from others. Also, for example, khinkali is really khinkali came from the mountains. So the people in the mountains were doing it, and then slowly it came to the valleys and to the towns, and it got popular. So that's. Yeah.
And what's that? What's a khinkali?
Oh, so khinkali. Khinkali is an art in itself, I think. Like, it's first of all, it's really convenient. Like with any food, you need a lot of stuff. For example, for some food you need bread. For some, you need some kind of sauces and a lot of stuff. But khinkali has everything in it. So it's a kind of a roll of bread, let's say. Not dough, bread, but dough, like roll of dough. Inside you get a mix of different meat, like beef or pork or sheep or others, and you boil it. And when you boil it, the juices inside stay inside. So after you start eating, all the delicious juice are inside, and you can either at the same time drink it and also eat it. So it's really, really delicious, and it's a perfect cure for a hangover or like a cold Georgian weather that you get, especially in the mountains. So it's really hot and really tasty, and it's really good.
It's a really, we taste it. It's like a big, without sounding rude, it's like a dumpling, but better.
It looks like maybe. I would say the dumpling looks like khinkali,
but
it's not that, of course.
And then there were like some kind of I want to say ritual to eat in Italy.
Of course.
Can you describe it shortly?
Yeah, so you have to eat by your hands. So that's why I was saying that it's really convenient. You don't need a lot of stuff for it, so you can eat it by your hands. And also the structure is structured in a way that it looks like mountains that are snowed in.
It does.
And you have also, of course, a lot of people also use the pepper on it. So it's like, and then and when it's hot, a hot air comes out of it, and it looks really cool and really beautiful, like a mountain mist. So they are also calling that too.
I'd love a piece of khinkali right now, really.
I
miss them since yesterday.
Speaking of food, you get so hungry, right?
Yeah.
But if you only could take one, speaking of so many Georgian dishes, and we tasted many of them, and they were, like they say that Georgians do great food, and rightfully so that they say that, because it's really good. But if you only could choose one dish to bring on you to a like abandoned island, like one Georgian dish, what would you take with you?
If I would know that the world is going to end and I would have to eat one last Georgian thing, it would be chakapuli. Of course.
Chakapuli.
Chakapuli. Yeah, it's the one with the goat meat, and not the goat, sorry, the sheep meat, and it's also with a lot of herbs, and it's kind of a stew that you make. It has like juicy and a lot of herbs. It's also really healthy for you.
Did we have it yesterday or not?
No, not yet, because like you have to eat it during a season. So it has a special season during spring, when the spring lambs are already in, and also the nature is waking up. The nature is giving you the best things to offer. For example, it has the plum that you have to have, the fresh plum in this stew. So it's I would suggest anyone and everyone to taste it, and you will not be left without really good experience.
It sounds really good. But you said it's seasonal food, right? It's a seasonal food, like it's you can't eat it
seasonal.
Yep. Do you have any other like tradition, like what do you eat for New Year's or Christmas?
For New Year's it's really popular to bake a small piglet.
Like a small pig?
Like a small pig, and you make it in a special Georgian way, which doesn't really look like humane and really great, but it's really good. Like it's really really good. Also, we also have the turkey culture. At the New Year's, we also bake turkey. But the main thing I would say is that also for Christmas we have a special dessert. We didn't talk about desserts other than
yeah.
churchkhela, but we also have one dessert with walnuts, which is called kozinaki. And that's only done during the Christmas and the New Year. And it's really, really, really good. Like you make it with honey and walnuts.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Isn't it the baklava or it's not?
No, it's not, but
the
it's
Turkish one, but
yeah, it's maybe a little bit closer to that, but
Okay.
it's not that. Like it's
Okay.
different. It's really full with honey and with walnuts and other nuts, and it's like yeah, it's really crispy, of course, also, and it's really tasty. So yeah.
we should have that.
Yeah, it sounds really. I think we need to stop talking about food. I'm
Yeah.
gonna get too hungry.
Yeah,
too
maybe.
hungry.
Let's talk now about the most famous Georgian people that make you
Okay.
proud of your identity. And first, I will ask a question about a typical question about the guy that we are all seeing here in Kakheti, about Erekle.
Okay.
Tell us about him and why is he so important for you?
Yeah, so for Tel Aviv especially, and for the whole country, I think he's really important figure because he was a great warrior, and he was the king of our region, and he had the palace in the Tel Aviv. So for Tel Avians and people who are born here, he is one of the most important persons, of course, during the history. Although he's in some way controversial person because of one tractate that he made and one negotiation that he made with Russia, but for me personally, he's still a great historical person and the one who I think a lot of people should look up to because he was a great warrior and a patriot and did a lot for our country. So other than him, for Kakheti, I think he's the one, for sure, one of the first historian person, but do you want to know modern ones also? Or?
Would love
yeah,
to.
we would love to. But I have one question more about Erekle. Like,
Yeah.
how is like one treaty? Because he was from the 18th century, right?
Yeah,
like
somewhere there,
300 years ago. How is one treaty still controversial? Like,
Yeah, so that treaty was during the time where we were really in a bad situation with with our other enemies from the south. So he had to make a decision to either fight and be outnumbered and probably have the Persians or some other enemies destroy our country, or he had to sign the contract with the Russians to at least get us the safety and have the country continue to exist. And that's one of the most controversial because after that started our centuries-old problems with Russia, and that's why it's still kind of controversial today. A lot of people say that he didn't have another choice. He made the right choice. Some disagree, but for me, I can't really judge him because he was a great warrior, great king for us, and he did a lot of good stuff. So I think that he didn't also have the support that he needed to fight. Because throughout our history, we had really a lot of situations where we could have, we were outnumbered, but we still fought and won. And we had a lot of situations like that. But in that special case, I think we were in a really, really bad spot. And I think, I don't know what I would have done in his place, but I can't really judge him because he has done a lot of great things for us.
Yeah, so
And moderns, right?
yeah, some
Yeah,
modern
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Like, not only like
Move on to
boring, not
modern.
boring, but like old people. Like
Yeah.
some, for the youth.
So for the youth, I think sports is one, and I really want to talk about that in that sense
Sure.
that we really love sports, and we have.
Which kind of sports?
I think the football is number one.
football.
For sure, yeah, football is number one. Then I would say it's basketball, and then it's really close, and also the rugby. Of course, I have to mention that. And the importance of sports and the team sports for Georgia is really high. And after becoming the independent, and even we were independent during the Soviet time, we had a lot of world-class athletes, which unfortunately couldn't really perform on the world stage because of the Soviet Union's way of handling all of that. But after we became independent, we had several really, really famous and great people. But for now, I think the most famous Georgian for today, if you would go out and ask like anyone, I think it must be Khvicha Kvaratskhelia, who is a football player, who is a really young, like 22 years old, but he's playing in Italy, in Naples, and he is like a phenomenon in that sense. Like he's throughout the world, he's known, and for Georgians, it's really important to have the people like that because we are a small country, so anyone that represents us in a good way instantly becomes the hero
It's
here.
like an international relations thing.
Yeah,
to
for sure, because
become an ambassador.
he's presenting his country,
Yeah.
and every Georgian has that responsibility. Also, the same can be said on other sports, like for rugby and for basketball also, because we had a couple of NBA champions and some other guys. So, and in rugby, of course, in Europe, we are pretty high in the rankings. And yeah, and the rugby is special for Georgians also because it's kind of a physical sport. So we are really like to do it, and they are really popular. Yeah.
Okay, now speaking about women that made Georgia famous, tell us about some women that left their mark on Georgia and on the whole country.
Yeah, I would say the first that came to my mind was Queen Tamar. She was really, really important person in Georgian's history. She was the one who created one of the first parliament type of institutions in like 12th or 13th century. So she's really important for us. Other than that, there were several strong women who did great for Georgia. Like there was Ketevan Zamebuli, there were some others. But the first one and the biggest one who comes to mind is Tamar Mepe. And of course, there's some also rumors that the famous Georgian poem Vepkhis, which we talked about yesterday, is about her. So the
Who
person
was the poem
who wrote
written by?
it was Shota Rustaveli.
So he was the one that
he wrote
talked
it,
about,
and there are
yeah.
some rumors that he loved her, the queen, and he wrote the poem because of her, and he presented that to her. So that's
Kind of sweet.
yeah.
Actually.
And if you read the poem, it's really like it's an epic genre, like really epic, literally and like in other way. It's really epic and it's really cool, and the whole like story is pretty entertaining. And I hope that one day they will do a movie about that because I really want to.
We should read it.
Yeah,
There should be an English translation.
It's
for
a
sure.
quite long poem, but it's really interesting and engaging. And actually, every Georgian really learns it during the school. It's a mandatory one that you have to know. So yeah.
Okay, it should also be mandatory for us to read it.
maybe. But how is like the gender equality here in Georgia? Is the very like unequal, or is there more?
So
How would you describe
in
it?
life, as everything in life, it's like it depends on what do you compare it. So for example, if you compare it to Sweden, it's really different. And it's of course more like men-dominated country in that sense because again we come down to the history, right? So since Georgians really love the tradition and the history and all of that stuff, our culture is also influenced by that, and we are for sure more men-dominated. But I wouldn't say that women are emancipated or something like that. They are still. They have still the ability to work. They have the ability to express themselves however they want. But we still, of course, have the issues like violence against women in some rural places or in some towns maybe. But we are still, of course, developing and we are getting better. And if you look at back like 10 years or 20 or 30 years ago, it's definitely on a good trend. And so we are developing.
Is there like a difference between like the older generation of women and the younger generation, like the ones who grew up in the Soviet Union?
For sure, that's a great point. And the generational gap in terms of like your mindset and your culture is really big, because in Soviet era everything was so different, and nowadays the young girls and women that are growing up now, they are really different. They don't have that stereotypes in themselves that the older generation women might have. So
Like internalized.
internalized, yeah, of course, because everything starts with internal. Because if you lay some roadblocks for yourself that I can't do this and it's not acceptable, then it can come to life. But if you are strong and if you push, then everything will be okay, I think.
But it's not worth being strong, and it's hard to be strong when there are so many influences from the outside.
I agree.
So it's not about your internalized feeling. You have to have it from the outside.
Of course, the problem may come during the in what kind of family were you raised, because some families are more traditional, some families are more modern, so it depends. But yeah, I really believe that Georgia is not a type of country where you might want to try something a lot and try to do it and you will have a lot of problems. That's not like that. For me, as I see it, we are really developing, and of course we are not like Sweden, but at the same time we are okay.
Okay, all right.
That sounds good. And changing topic once again. What is there to do here in Tel Aviv? Like when you're young, like what do young people do here in Georgia?
Yeah, I haven't seen so many young people, to be honest.
Yeah,
on the
that's quite a good observation, in that we are having a lot of brain drain, so to say, from the villages and the small towns around the capital.
So not to going abroad, but to
Also to
the
go
same
also to
cities.
abroad, but mainly to the capital. So that's why a lot of youngsters leave after they finish school and start the university in the capital or other cities, and they stay there. But but those who are living here, for example, in Tel Aviv, there's, again, due to the tourism, a lot of places that you can take, restaurants, cafes, bars, and all of that stuff. Also, theaters is really important, and in almost all of the big cities, in Kakheti, for example, and in all Georgia, there are theaters. So for Georgians, they really like theaters.
And is theater like big between for the youth, for the young people
Yeah,
as well?
also for the young people, but mainly the main way of hanging, killing time, so to say, is hang out, like outside. That's one of the most typical things that you will see in Georgia, when the youngsters are just sitting around, drinking a beer or talking about stuff. Also, the sports really have a big place in our culture and society, because even in the older generations, in the evenings or in the weekends, you see almost all of the parks and the stadiums, like small stadiums that you have, are filled full with people playing either basketball, football, volleyball, and all of that. So that's one of the biggest things. Also, like, a lot of people love to hunt, for example, go fishing, because we have a beautiful nature. And
You hunt, right?
yeah,
Am correct?
I try to. So, yeah.
Is there a lot of game in the area? Is there a lot of things?
I wouldn't say there are a lot of it, especially like you should have to compare it to something, right? So if you compare it to the Europe and if to the US, it's not that high. And also we had a really big problems in 90s after the Soviet Union, because a lot of people were killing a lot of animals without any control. They were using a lot of illegal stuff, so that had a really big impact on our nature. But slowly, during the years, everything is improving, and I hope that soon we will have more of it. But for now, the only thing that you can go hunt or fish, so for hunting, it's like birds, ducks, goose, for example, some other stuff. But actually, for fishing, it's more like we are really rich with water, so you get a lot of rivers, mountain rivers, you get a lot of lakes, so it's a really big popular activity to take.
And speaking
Nice.
about brain drain, I'm really interested about this
Yeah.
topic. How do you think you could, what needs to be done to reduce this brain drain and to keep young people here, for example, in Tel Aviv, to have enough opportunities?
Yeah, for Tel Aviv, for example, Tel Aviv is quite lucky in that sense, because they have the university, so they are managing to have at least some number of young people stay here, and also due to the tourism, there are a lot of jobs that they can take. But for other regions, for other towns, it's really hard. For other cities, so I think that if and when we will be more closer to the EU and start to adapt to their way of life, maybe we will have better opportunities for the youngsters to stay, and everything comes down to the economy, of course. So there are not enough jobs in the region that they can take, so that's why a lot of people leave. That's I think the economy, if the economy would have been better, then we would have seen a lot of more, because the life here is cheaper. The quality of life in the regions are much better than compared to the capital. You get really nice nature, the clean air, hospitable, good people. So yeah, actually a lot of Russians and Ukrainians and Belarusians and also from other European countries, they come here to work remotely, and I think it's a pretty nice place where you can rent a cheap house, have wine, have like good food, and like work
what
from
else
here.
should you
So
need?
what else should you need, right? Yeah.
Sounds really nice. Really nice. And when do people start, like, speaking of wine, of course, like the wine culture here is huge and really good, I would add. Like, we tasted some very good wines here. But when do young people start to drink here in Georgia? Like 3 years old?
It's again like changing a little bit. When I was younger, it was considered like mandatory kind of to start drinking as early as possible. Like you would go to
how early? How early is as early as possible?
I would say like after 13. You have, for example, if I talk about me and my friends and my neighbors and my immediate people that I know, like around 13 was the time that you were man enough to start drink wine. So,
but for healthy reasons, right? I mean, our grandparents used to say that we have to drink wine to be healthy.
But that's only like one glass per day.
Yeah, per day.
But here we have a different type
to improve our blood quality. I know.
Yeah. So when you are on the feast, you have to have a really valid reason to not drink, right? You have to be either on some kind of medication, or I don't know, you have to have a problem some kind, or like if you don't have a really valid reason and the tamada is really strict, you are in a bad situation, my friend, believe me.
What's gonna happen then?
You will be forced to drink.
Forced to drink?
Yeah. And you would
open your mouth and put some drink there.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it sounds nice. I think, but maybe it's a bit. How would you say it? Like a bit much, maybe for some people. It sounds really cool. And speaking also of young people and stuff like that. What's dating like, Angel? Like what's a typical date here in Tel Aviv? Like
typical date would be to hang out in the park. Or go to a cafe. That's one of the most typical dates. We don't, not me, I already have a wife and a son, but young persons don't really use that much of dating apps that they use in Europe, I think, or US. So in that sense, we are a little bit different. But yeah, I think when I was younger, and I think still today, it's going to the park or going to the movies or going to a cafe or something like that.
Do you have any tips for our listeners at home? Like what's the ideal, if I wanna import dating culture to Sweden, the Georgian dating culture, what's the ideal Georgian date in your opinion? Like
ideal Georgian date, I think average, I would say, is to start in a cafe, like around 5-6 p.m., maybe a little bit later, then go to the movies. Then walk some, then finish at the bar or a place where you can drink a little bit wine, and that's it. So I think
typical one.
Yeah, that's a very typical one.
Nice.
But yeah, then after you get to know each other a lot, and if you are continuing the relationship, then you have to start introducing all of your friends in the picture, right? Taking your partner to your friends, meeting them, or your family. So it's then it gets a little bit complicated.
More actors.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, let's wrap it up
Yeah,
now.
I think I don't have any more questions. I think I understand Georgia now.
Yeah,
I think
we'll
I-
definitely add your locations on our bucket list. And now let's remind our listeners that Echolocation is a podcast created between Georgia, Moldova, and Sweden. That is in K News, DS, and Global Bar magazine. It's a podcast that aims to create an echo for society by having 3 different perspectives from young people. Thank you, Levani and Sweden and Sweden.
the whole country of
Thank you,
Sweden.
Georgia and Sweden, for being here with me. Moldova
you,
was
Mark.
glad to host you.
Yeah, thank you very
And,
much. Welcome again here, and I'm sure that our listeners, I hope that they had a good time, and I hope to see them in Georgia. So
And to listen to our next
Yeah, and to
episode and
listen
our
to our-
previous ones. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Alina-Maria.